You see these massive ships gliding across the ocean, right? They look like floating cities, and you'd think their journey is just effortless. But it's not. What you don't see is the constant invisible war they're fighting against the incredible power of the water itself. So let's dive into this hidden battle of physics and engineering. I mean, really think about that for a second. 500,000 tons. What does it actually take to move that much mass through something as thick as water? Well, it takes overcoming this colossal force called resistance. And trust me, it's not just about splashing some water out of the way. Oh no, it's way more complex and honestly, way more fascinating than that. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to define that unseen battle. Then, we'll meet the enemy, the forces of resistance. After that, we'll look at the pure genius of using models to predict them, see how that gets scaled up to a real megaship, and finally, we'll connect it all back to why this 150-year-old science is still the bedrock of our world today. All right, let's put a name to this thing. In naval architecture, they call it total resistance. Really, all that means is the force you would need to just tow a ship through perfectly calm water at a steady speed. It's basically the sum of everything the ocean is doing to hold that ship back. And if you're designing a ship, you absolutely have to be able to predict that number. It's everything. Okay, so this total resistance isn't just one big monster force. It's more like a team of villains, all working together to slow a ship down. And to figure out how to beat them, engineers first had to figure out who they were. So let's do a little roll call, shall we? In calm water, you're up against four main culprits. You've got frictional resistance, which is basically the water clinging to the ship's skin. Then there's wave-making resistance, which is all the energy the ship loses just by creating those waves. You've also got eddy resistance from messy, swirling water, and of course, good old air resistance on everything above the waterline. But for today, we're going to focus on the two heavy hitters, friction and waves. Frictional resistance is, well, it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. You've felt this. If you've ever dragged your hand through the water in a pool, that pull you feel, that's it. Water's kind of sticky, it's viscous. So when a giant hull whirs through it, it literally drags a thin layer of water along for the ride. And that creates this powerful, constant braking force across the entire ship. And check this out. This shows you exactly what's happening. See that boundary layer? Right up against the hull, the water is basically stuck to the ship, moving along with it. As you move farther out, the water gets slower and slower until it's perfectly still. The ship's engines have to pour a ton of energy into just keeping that boundary layer moving. Now for the second big villain, wave-making resistance. You know those beautiful V-shaped waves that trail behind a ship? They look pretty, but they're actually energy thieves. Every single one of those waves is pure energy that the ship has pushed into the ocean. And the ship has to keep making them constantly just to move forward. It's a relentless drain on the engines. So this brings us to the million-dollar question for any ship designer, right? How on earth do you calculate these incredibly complex forces for a ship that only exists as a blueprint? You can't just build a 500,000-ton vessel and hope for the best. The answer, as you might have guessed, is to use scale models. But as we're about to see, that simple solution created a whole new, seemingly impossible problem. And this is where our hero enters the story, an English engineer named William Froude. Back in the 1860s, he came up with this law of comparison. Now, don't worry about reading the whole quote, it's a bit of a mouthful. The key idea he figured out is that you can predict the wave resistance of a huge ship by testing a tiny model, but only if you run that model at a very specific, corresponding speed. And here it is, the paradox, the central conflict. Froude's law for waves worked perfectly, but the physics of friction, yeah, that followed a completely different set of rules. So to get the wave test right, your little model needed to go nice and slow. But to get the friction test right, that same model had to go ridiculously, mind-bogglingly fast. We're talking hundreds of knots. You can't be slow and fast at the same time. It seemed like a total dead end. This is what made Froude a legend. He had this incredible aha moment. He realized that everyone was trying to solve this impossible problem by scaling everything at once. And his revolutionary idea was so simple. If the laws of physics won't let you test them together, then just don't. Separate them. Tackle them one by one. And that single idea gave birth to the Froude method, a step-by-step process that turned ship design from a dark art into a predictive science. What's absolutely wild is that this method, with some tweaks of course, is still the fundamental process used in high-tech towing tanks all over the world. So let's walk through how it works. Okay, Froude's method is this ingenious 6-step dance.
First, you tow the little model and measure its total drag. Simple enough? Second, since you can't measure the friction part correctly at this slow speed, you calculate it using established formulas. Third, you subtract that friction number from the total you just measured, and whatever's left over, that has to be the model's wave resistance. Now, for the magic part, you use Freud's law to scale that wave resistance up to the full-size ship. Then you calculate the big ship's friction separately, and finally, you add the two big ship numbers together, and boom, you've got your prediction.
But did it actually work?
Oh yeah, it worked. The British Admiralty let Froude test his theory by towing a full-scale warship, the HMS Greyhound, and comparing the real numbers to his predictions. The results were stunning. Just look at this original data. His predictions from a tiny model got incredibly close to the real thing, especially at higher speeds where the difference was less than 10%. The theory was proven. He'd cracked the code.
So this is way more than just a clever history lesson. Froude's breakthrough didn't just help build better warships. It laid the very foundation for the modern world by making global trade efficient and, most importantly, predictable. And here's the number that really drives that point home. For those giant, slow-moving ships that are the backbone of global commerce, the tankers, the container ships, frictional resistance isn't just a part of the problem. It's a staggering 80 to 85% of the total drag holding them back. It is the problem. And that right there is the core takeaway. Froude's method of separating out and accurately calculating frictional resistance is what allows us to design these incredibly efficient vessels today. Every gallon of fuel saved, every product that arrives on time, every single thing you own that crossed an ocean, it owes a small debt to this fundamental breakthrough. It's the hidden science that powers our world. So Froude's method has stood the test of time for 150 years, which is just incredible. But as we look to a future of even more efficient, more sustainable shipping, it really makes you wonder, what's next? Will it be new kinds of hull coatings, systems that blow a carpet of air bubbles under the ship, or something nobody has even dreamed of yet? One thing's for sure, the unseen battle against the seas is far from over.